Meet Shelley, a podium dancer from London.
A city girl is me, born and bred, and I always will be.
She has 1 month to pass herself off as a seasoned show jumper.
Hay sale, £1.50. Oh, God.
But she's never sat on a horse before.
Jesus. Look, he don't like me. Why is it smelling there? That's weird.
Yeah, wait.
Stop, back.
Your breath stinks.
No way, mate. No, I'm not having it taken off like that.
You need to clean your teeth.
Stop crying.
How can you say that?
What?
Will Shelley fall at the first hurdle or gallop her way to victory? Find out in Faking It, Tuesday at 9 on 4.
Hello. As a psychiatrist, I'm worried about my passion for the number 4. I was born on the 4th day of the 4th month. It's my lucky number. It's also the number of fingers I have on my left hand. And it's also my favorite TV channel.
This week, we're going to take a look at the Agapetes family. Now, rhododendrons, azaleas and heathers are probably best known to gardeners. There's a few mavericks in there as well. And of course, they come from all over the world, except deserts. And that's hardly surprising, as most of them require a bit of dampness in the soil. Now, at one stage, rhododendrons are only to be found in grand estates. But now with the breeding of smaller plants, they're for everybody. And what a diversity! Get this right. See these large, blousy rhododendron flowers? They're in the same family as this squinny wee heather. This week, Anne meets some colourful relations of the Rothschilds at Exbury Gardens and discovers some of the trials and tribulations of the plant hunters. I find a beautiful shrub with flowers like parasols and a hidden gem in the glasshouses at Kew. And Anne also discovers something a bit different for the small garden.
Ken, your family have been involved with rhododendrons here at Glendoick for 3 generations, hasn't it?
My grandfather was lucky enough to get on an expedition in 1919 with Reginald Farrer, who was one of the great British plant collectors who introduced so many of our commonest garden plants.
That must have been tremendously exciting in those days to go off like that.
It was very exciting, but funnily enough, he never went plant collecting again. But my father has always been a plant collector, and I've started quite recently. This group of plants here, Rhododendron yunnanense, was collected on an expedition in 1981 when China reopened. Unfortunately, my father, through bad timing of being born just before the Second World War, he was old enough at the time, the communists took over, and China threw all Westerners out, and no one was allowed back in. For 20 or 30 years it was closed. And so in 1980, when the Chinese finally allowed an expedition in, there was no way he wasn't going to be on it, and he and Roy Lancaster and botanists from Kew and Edinburgh went to Yunnan, and amongst other things they collected this seeds that these plants were grown from. It wasn't the first time that this species was collected though. It was first collected in 1915, and we have a much older plant over here which we can have a look at.
It's magnificent. It's just like a flowering waterfall, isn't it?
It's much bigger than the other ones. One of the oldest plants in the garden, and probably dates back to the 1920s, and could even be one of the original seedlings, because this species was first introduced in 1913, 1914, simultaneously by 2 of the greatest plant collectors, George Forrest and Frank Kingdom Ward.
I have to admit I'm a bit of a wimp where plant hunting is concerned. I never hankered after being one of these plant hunters. I think I'd like to have been one of the head gardeners who had to cope with all the seeds and cuttings they brought back.
Yes, I think that's what my grandfather felt, because many of the plant collectors did die out in the field. Both Forrest and Farrer actually caught tropical diseases while they were on expeditions and died out there. But their stories weren't the worst. Some plant hunters met an even more gruesome end. If you come over here, I'll show you another. This is Rhododendron Sulii, which is named after Père Soulier, who was one of a group of French missionaries working in the Sichuan Tibet border areas in the 1880s and 1890s. And this group of missionaries were also plant collectors, and they sent specimens back to Paris. Apparently Soulier himself sent over 7,000 specimens back.
7,000, that's a lot, isn't it? Makes you wonder what his motive was, missionary work or plant hunting.
Well, I think it was quite clear that he was more interested in plant hunting. Apparently he learnt the local dialects and disguised himself as a local, and then went off into Tibet to explore and to search for plants. And in 1905 he was warned of impending danger from an invasion from Tibetan lamas, because this area was extremely warlike. There was lots of bloodshed between the Chinese and the Tibetans. But rather than heed the warnings, he was so diligent in his plant collecting, he stayed behind to pack up some specimens of plants to send back to Paris, and he was captured by the Tibetans, who were not at all pleased to find a Catholic priest in the area, and they tortured him for 15 days and then they shot him dead. And this plant remains his epitaph. Everything we've been looking at up to now has been species, pure species grown from seed in the wild. And in contrast, this is an example of one of the bigger rhododendron hybrids, Lem's Cameo, bred in Western North America like most of the important breeding breakthroughs in recent years.
Very colourful, isn't it? You know, I prefer the species, I think. I sometimes wonder what the motives are behind the hybridisers' breeding programmes.
Certainly, species rhododendron collectors are always turning their noses up at hybrids, but there are certain attributes that hybrids have. They may not have such interesting foliage, but they generally flower younger. You may have to wait many, many years, up to 10 years or more, for a species to flower. And even at that stage, it may not flower every year, and it may not flower very reliably or many trusses. Whereas the hybrids have been bred specifically to be reliable, to flower every year, and also to flower from a young age.
So when would this be in bloom?
Well, this one would probably bloom as a 3-year-old, and hopefully, all going well, it would flower every year afterwards. These are 3 modern, recently bred and recently introduced evergreen azaleas, Japanese azaleas, which are just coming onto the market now.
Well, I can see they'd have their uses for somebody with a smaller garden, but quite honestly, I can't stand things like this. I think this is ghastly. To me, this just looks like a whole load of pink tissue paper with green leaves stuck in it.
I think that's exactly what the breeder had in mind when he selected that cross, and quite apart from whether it's to your taste or not, I suppose one could say that if you're a garden centre owner or a nurseryman, that means pound signs.
Yeah, I rather thought so. And if somebody plants this with that in their garden, they need their heads examining. But I'm not going to hold you personally responsible for those, because I know you didn't breed them.
No, we didn't breed those ones, but we did breed these 3 here. We've had a long breeding programme, both of rhododendrons and azaleas. The rhododendrons have been named after birds, because that was my father's other love, apart from plants. And the azaleas were all named after animals. Lemur, panda and squirrel. There are 3 things that we're looking for when we're breeding evergreen azaleas. One is compact habit, the second one is evergreen leaves, and the third one is that there need to be azaleas which are good in the north. Now, if you contrast those 3 with this is Megan, very spectacular azalea. When it's in flower, it sells like hotcakes. But the problem with it is that it's sparse, it's extremely straggly.
I can see your point. It is somewhat ungainly. It's got a lot of stem, hasn't it? But those white ones are beautiful. I really do like those.
Well, what we've done here is I've used this Azalea Panda, which is the best-selling white azalea now in this country, but it's nearly prostrate. It's very low growing. And I thought it would be useful to try and get something a bit taller, but without going for the straggliness that we've got here. So I've crossed Panda with a tall, not very hardy white azalea called Mucronatum, which isn't really suitable for our climate at all. And these are 2 sister seedlings that we've selected from that cross. And from a distance they look very similar, but if you look close up you can see that there is a difference. This one here has petaloid stamens in the middle, and it's a pure white colour. Well, this one has a pinkish or a silvery tinge and also more spotting in the flower.
I rather like the little freckles in there. I think they're both great. And I've just got one last question to ask you. Where did you get your jacket?
On the way back from one of my plant collecting expeditions in Tibet, I had a tailor make it for me in Kathmandu, in Nepal.
I don't know if I go that far.
Now, see, when most gardeners think of rhododendrons, they tend to think of those hardy evergreen shrubs that burst into full bloom around Easter time. But see, if you come indoors, there's a bit more protection and warmth. There is something really special going on. Just take a look at this. Here is one of these special rhododendrons. It's called Rhododendron veitchianum, and it comes from the damp, steamy forests of Burma and Thailand, where it grows as an epiphyte high up in the canopy. But you know, the great thing about these tender rhododendrons is the perfume. See, if you take a sniff, oh, it's so alluring, it's so seductive, it's really something special. But you know, just when you thought you were getting to know the rhododendron family, along comes a real surprise. See this wee thing in here? Called Agapetes serpens, or if you like, Pentapterygium, and it even comes from the same region in the Himalayas. And this thing makes an ideal arching shrub for a big pot in the conservatory. But in the same family is this rhododendron here. This one is called Rhododendron loranthiflorum, and it's got that same real heady scent. But see this time? Aye, I thought so. It's got a real kind of jasmine-y smell about it, really special plant. You know, it always puzzles me. Why do people do things like grow deck chairs, barbecues and picnic tables in their conservatory? Nah. Chuck them out and grow one of these wonderful plants instead.
Recipe for a beautifully clean, soft face. Take 1 new Dove Daily Cleansing Cloth, unfold and soak in warm water to release cleansers, moisturisers and vitamins. Now with a specially textured cloth that gently massages your skin, cleanse away grime and makeup, then rinse, pat dry and enjoy softer, radiant looking skin. New Dove Daily Cleansing Cloths for beautifully clean and soft skin.
Panasonic Power Max 3 lasts longer than expected.
It looks like you've had a fair bit of frost up here in Aberdeen.
Yes, I'm afraid so. We've just had a rather nasty snow shower the other day. Wouldn't believe it now, but there were very icy winds which have done quite a lot of damage.
It's because the warm weather before that had pushed everything on, hadn't it?
It had done. The flowers were quite advanced, and it's unusual for us to get quite that level of frost at this time of year.
These larger rhododendrons seem to have stood up to it better than some of the other plants.
Some of them do. This is an old Williamsianum hybrid called Karin, and I think this is pretty much everybody's archetypal idea of a rhododendron, and they can stand the frost quite well. These flowers that weren't fully out are pretty much okay, but then these ones which were a little bit further out, just take hold of them and they come away in your hand.
It's a shame, isn't it?
It is a bit sad. Yeah.
Plenty of buds to come though, so
plenty
not to
of buds
worry.
to come, that's the way of it.
Oh, now these are tiny, aren't they?
Yes, these are the
gorgeous.
little fellows.
Yeah.
A lot more like a bed of heathers, really, aren't they? The great thing about these little ericaceous plants is that you can squeeze so many into a small space. Even the most modern estate garden can have heaps of these little fellas in. You just squeeze them all in, they like the company.
Yeah, you could have quite a collection. Now, which is this blue one?
That's impeditum, very good at giving you a later flush in the autumn as well. Slightly varying shades. This is sarlid. I don't think you'd know that was a rhododendron flower, would you?
Not if you just pulled it off and showed it to me,
No,
no.
it's quite unusual. It's almost like a little Daphne flower or something.
Yes.
Aromatic leaves as well.
Yeah.
Very, very scented.
Very spicy, aren't they?
Very spicy. I don't know whether it's the taste of it or the actual fact that it is oily, gums up their teeth, but the vine weevils don't like this.
Well, that's very useful.
Yes,
to
that's
know.
very useful. I don't know whether, we've often debated whether or not you could get an extract of these little scented ones and spray it on the big ones as a repellent.
What a good
I can't
idea.
understand why nobody's doing it. Maybe somebody is.
What about deadheading? How do you go about that in such a
Well,
small plant?
for these little ones, it would take hours to sit and pick properly the dead heads off a tiny one like this. But for most of these, if you just brush them backwards and forwards like sweeping crumbs off the table, doesn't matter if you rumble them about a bit, it won't hurt them. And that knocks off the dead heads, tidies them up a bit, and they do pretty well.
I can really smell that.
Yes,
since
doesn't
you
it?
were
Releases
disturbing
the oil,
it.
and you can really get the flavour.
Now this looks like a rather special rhododendron.
Yes, this is one of my favourites. This is a white form of Rhododendron wardii, which is, of course, normally yellow. But here we have these very, very beautiful dark pink buds, which flush gently a sort of apple blossom and then turn into these gorgeous, absolutely pure white flowers.
They are
very
wonderful.
pretty thing.
You take full advantage of your acid soil by growing a wide range of ericaceous plants, not just rhododendrons, don't you? Like this, for instance.
Well, yes. This is one of the forms of Pieris forestii. Almost looks like flowers, doesn't it? But of course, they're coloured leaves. But they give a lovely display. But we find these forms only flower every other year, which can be a bit disappointing, nice scented flowers. But come and I'll show you one which flowers every year. This is a Pieris japonica,
beautiful.
which flowers really well. Heavy racemes of very heather-like flowers, aren't they?
They are.
Sweetly scented.
Sniff.
Supposed to be lily of the valley. Are
Very
you convinced?
faint, isn't it?
Yes,
Very
it's very
faint,
faint.
almost.
Yes, very nearly.
And I presume they'll still have the colourful new shoots, will they?
Oh yes, but of course much later, after the flowers have dropped, the coloured shoots will come up, but they'll be less bright than the forestii, which tends to be more in the sort of pinks and salmons. This is more a gingery sort of bronze colour. Next to it, this Carmiopsis leachiana here. It goes on for a long, long time, probably from March, sometimes right through into August.
It's got such a good strong colour as well.
Lovely with the
hasn't it?
red calyx, very pretty. I don't really know of another family that has got the tremendous range all through of flowering season, repeat flowers, variety of flower, flower shape, flower size, flower colour, flower type, foliage, scented foliage, evergreen foliage, little, big, you name it. Erics have got it. They're wonderful things.
Do you have a favourite?
Well, it varies from minute to minute. At the moment, I think perhaps sweetie of the minute is this little Andromeda pollifolia. Now, isn't that sweet? She's only tiny with these glaucous, spiky little blue-grey leaves and then these wonderful pink, heathery sort of flowers. That's a little pet at the minute, I think.
Isn't this an amazing sight? Now this is the woodland at Wisley and it's dominated by these huge stands of Kalmia latifolia. Now it's a North American special, sometimes referred to as mountain laurel, and because their winters are so much colder than ours, this thing is hardy to -30. But take a closer look at these pretty pale pink flowers. Now they're beautifully marked and individually fascinating. See these wee pink parasols? Well, each one of them has got 10 spring-loaded ribs in there. And what happens is, the insects come along, they have a bit of a rummage around and they pop. And out comes the pollen, showering the intruding insect with pollen. So there you have it, an extremely clever shrub, ideally suited at home in Surrey or Inverness.
Nicholas, how large are the gardens here at Exbury?
About 250 acres. My grandfather was a rhododendron nut. Took 250 men to clear it and plant it over 20 years.
Yes. And the great challenge for the head gardeners too, of course,
that's
Paul.
right.
You're the latest in a line of head gardeners.
Yeah, we think about 6 before me.
Which is not many, really, is it?
No, they've all stayed here quite a long time.
Yes, well, that bodes well. But it must have been so exciting for them to try and find out where all these new plants would have grown.
That's right, because in those days they'd never been grown before in the UK, so you were trying to discover the climate and the water and the shade and all this kind of stuff.
All the big gardens around the country sponsored plant hunting expeditions together. So they all had the same sort of seeds, but there's only about 100, 150 varieties of rhododendron. So after that, the compulsion came to hybridise. Because in a garden of this size, 100 species didn't go very far. So they needed to fill the gardens with something. That's when the real fun began in hybridising.
This is a lovely sturdy rhododendron. Which one is it?
This little cracker is named after my dad. This is Edmund de Rothschild.
When does this date back to, roughly?
Oh, probably the 40s.
Gorgeous colour. How do you decide where you're going to plant them?
Well, you're looking for an open area,
Yeah.
surrounded with a bit of protection, so you've got a few trees and shrubs around it, but basically sunlight and protection.
And has this been so historically?
No, we now look for really display to put colour so that the public can enjoy them.
So it's maximum flower power all the way along the line.
Absolutely. Impact is what we go for nowadays. Yeah. This one's named after my sister Charlotte, Pinken Blousey. She's an opera singer, so I think it suits her character quite nicely.
Is she still going to love you after this?
Oh, I think so.
No, it's a lovely plant. Is there one named after you?
Yes, I'm purple, with a white throat. Pink for girls, purple or red for boys.
Quite a sexist naming system then.
I'm afraid so. And this one, Anne, is me.
Oh,
this is
very
Nicholas.
Much. That's lovely.
This one's a Fred Winniett Grex called Bach Croix. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Well, that's very good because it is gorgeous. So this one's not named after the family?
Yeah, there's not that many members of the family to name them after.
So who is it named after?
This one's named after Fred Winniett, who was a head gardener between the 50s and 60s.
So do you think you'll ever get any named after you?
I couldn't possibly comment, as they say.
There must be quite a few more in this group.
Yes, this out of the seed pod that produced this, there's maybe another 7 or 8. Stanway, Trianon, Bach Croix, Freddie Winniett, Jerez. It produced a lot of good plants from one cross.
Now this looks like a really useful low-growing plant here.
Yes, it is. This is evergreen azalea, Leo. It was bred, well, it's bred in the late 30s, and it produces every year a colourful display like this. Since the 30s, it's proved to be very hardy, so it's suitable for wherever you can grow rhododendrons and azaleas, really.
And what about the name? Another one of your relatives?
Absolutely, this is named after my uncle Leo. He also has a red rhododendron named after him, but he doesn't do as well as my sister Charlotte, who has not only the rhododendron, an azalea, which is white, and a camellia as well.
She does very well.
She does very well. She's got all 3.
Yes. But of course, put the words azalea and exbury together, and people think of exbury hybrids, don't they?
Yes,
which
that's
are a
right.
group.
Yeah. These exbury azaleas were bred in the 20s, and then further breeding occurred in the 50s, so that you ended up with a plant that was very colourful, was able to stand the full sun and not lose its colour, and were very fragrant. So you end up like an avenue here, which is just a kaleidoscope of colour and a mixture of smells which is impossible to describe.
It is very, very colourful, isn't it? Any particular favourites?
Yes, this one's one of my favourites. It's called Drury Lane. It's reminiscent of the showgirls of London with all the frills, and it's a wonderful tight head with the orange. It's very gay.
It is very apt. I bet this one's scented, isn't it? Is it? Oh, slightly. Some are more than others, aren't they?
The scent tends to be in the yellow ones.
Yes, I thought it
I
might
don't
have
know why.
passed into that. Now tell me, are you genuinely interested in these plants that dominate the garden, or is it just that you were born into it, Nicholas?
Oh, the bug didn't really bite until after I passed my 30th birthday, I don't think. Before then, I was only interested in sort of bringing girls into the garden and enjoying myself in other ways, but now I enjoy the flowers, and I'm actually much more involved in the breeding of the plants and really the continuation of the garden to the 21st century.
Yeah, so it really is something that's got hold of you now.
Yeah.
I suppose it does beat saying, come up and see my etchings or something, doesn't it?
Yes.
Scotland, would you believe it? It's raining again. But here we have a gardener's delight. Now, this is called Erica cineraria, the native Scottish bell heather, and it's got a lot going for it. It's great, it smothers the weeds, it just marches outwards, and it doesn't need any trimming, you just let it get on with it. The longer you leave it, the better it is. And it grows in a dry, acid, sandy soil, no problem. And you know, you get months and months of flowering out of it, and it even tolerates all this wonderful Scottish wet rain. You know, you'd think it was a marvellous plant, wouldn't you? I can't stand it.
It's countdown to Richard and Carol and a few conundrums next on 4.
Nah, I'm okay. I'm over it.
No, I'm good. Really, I am. Life is good.
Who? Well, I mean, it was hard at first, but you know, life moves on.
Those names do ring a bell, but I... Oh, yes, of course, yes, I know who you mean.
I've been filling my time with lots of things.
But that's the way it is. You've got to move on to pastures new.
No, I haven't missed them at all.
I haven't thought about them in ages now.
I barely even know who they are.
Anyway, mate, all done for you?
Well, my name's Robert. Robert and Julie forever.
The waiting's over. They're back and they're live. Richard and Judy starts Monday at 5 on 4.
Irish Republic. The Republic of Ireland will do, yes. Sheila, please. Halcyon is a poetic word used for which bird?
Crested grebe.
Kingfisher. Correct. Paul, please.
No.
International organisations. In which European capital city are the headquarters of NATO? Paris.
I'll have some mince, an egg, an onion, and some all bread.
And what can you make out of that then?
It's 10 letters, isn't it? Beef burger.
Hello and welcome to the Thursday show. I'm delighted to say that in the shifting sands that represent our studio audiences, they come and go, of course, and we have some very intellectual people in tonight, Carol. They are members of the legal profession.
Oh, really? Are they?
Yes, they are.
What, prison officers? Prisoners?
Well, they might well end up there. But so they will appreciate this latest batch of emails, because these actually are quite intellectual, these.
Oh, right.
Give me a figure.
Are you sure you're going to be able to cope with them?
No, this is a big test for me.
7.
Right, a group of chess enthusiasts checked into a hotel and were standing in the lobby discussing their recent tournament victories. After about an hour, the manager came out of the office and asked them to disperse. But why? They asked as they moved off. Because, he said,
Join Bob Monkhouse for the National Lottery Live, Saturday 10 to 8, BBC One.